today's mindful moment, we throw around this term founding fathers, pretty casually. But what happens when those fathers had some seriously radical ideas? That's what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into the mind of one of America's most revolutionary thinkers, and that's Thomas Paine.
Right.
Now, you've probably heard of Common Sense, his call for independence that set the colonies ablaze. But we're going even deeper with Rights of Man.
Okay.
So buckle up, because we're about to challenge everything you thought you knew about the origins of government and power.
Well, I think what's really fascinating about Paine is that he doesn't just criticize a specific king or a specific policy.
Right.
He goes for the jugular, and he's questioning the very foundations of how societies are structured.
So let's unpack this. Paine throws around this phrase, the paltry, rascally original of government.
Right.
What is he getting at here?
Well, he's arguing that governments, particularly monarchies, didn't spring from some noble ideal. Instead, they emerged from raw power grabs, often through violence and coercion. He uses the example of William the Conqueror, who, invaded England and imposed his rule.
So if a conquering warlord is the basis for a monarchy,
Yeah.
how does that square with the whole divine right of kings thing?
Well, that's precisely Paine's point. He's dismantling these traditional narratives of legitimacy, and he's exposing the often brutal realities behind claims to power. He wants us to see these historical figures not as divinely ordained rulers, but as flawed individuals driven by ambition and self-interest.
It's like he's pulling back the curtain and saying, look, this is how power really works.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah.
If monarchies are built on shaky foundations, what's the alternative?
Well, this leads Paine to make one of his most radical arguments.
Okay.
And he compares hereditary succession, this idea that power should be passed down through families, to the concept of original sin.
Hold on. Original sin and King George.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm following that logic.
Well, think about it. If we inherit the flaws of our ancestors, this idea that we're all born with a predisposition to sin,
Yeah.
why should we believe that certain families inherit some unique ability to rule? He's essentially saying that inheriting a throne doesn't automatically make someone a good leader. It's a scathing critique of the very premise of monarchy.
That's a pretty provocative comparison.
It is.
He's really turning traditional religious ideas on their head to make a political point.
Yeah, he's not afraid to be provocative.
So if he's tearing down the idea of monarchy, what does he propose in its place?
Well, Paine was a staunch advocate for representative government, a system where power flows from the people, not from birthright. He called it the delegated monarchy of a nation, suggesting that the people, not a king, are the true source of authority.
So instead of a king inheriting power, the people choose who represents them.
Exactly.
It sounds a lot like the system we have in the United States today.
It does.
But is that really so revolutionary? I mean, many countries have some form of representative government these days.
Right. But it's important to remember the historical context. In Paine's time, the idea that ordinary people should have a say in their government was incredibly radical. He was challenging the established order and advocating for a system that empowered the people. And Paine's radicalism didn't stop at, dismantling the concept of monarchy. He went on to dissect the entire English system of governance, particularly targeting what he called the pillars of society.
What did he see as so problematic about these pillars? I mean, weren't they supposed to be holding everything up?
Well, Paine argued that institutions like the House of Lords and the aristocracy, far from serving the common good, primarily function to protect their own interests and privileges.
So he saw them as more like
Yeah.
parasites than pillars.
I think that's a pretty apt analogy. He believed they were a drain on society clinging to power and wealth, while the common people bore the brunt of taxation and hardship.
He was especially critical of the tax system, wasn't he?
He was.
It's not exactly a topic that gets people fired up these days. But Paine seemed to find it pretty outrageous.
Well, he saw the inequality inherent in the tax system as a symptom of a deeper societal problem. And he pointed out how the burden of taxation fell disproportionately on working people, while the wealthy elite enjoyed exemptions and loopholes. One example he gives, which is striking for its simplicity, is the tax on beer.
Beer?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Because it was something ordinary people consumed every day.
Right.
And he highlights how the tax on beer was roughly equal to the entire land tax paid by the wealthy. So it's a vivid illustration of how the system was rigged against the common person.
That's a pretty powerful image, the everyday person being taxed on their beer while the wealthy landowners get off easy.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's making a case for economic justice centuries before that term even existed.
Right.
So if he was so critical of the existing system, what did he propose instead? Did he just want to tear everything down and start from scratch?
While he was certainly a revolutionary, Paine wasn't just about destruction. He believed in the power of government to create a more just and equitable society. He offered concrete, practical proposals aimed at alleviating poverty and creating a more level playing field.
So let's dive into some of these radical ideas.
Okay.
What did he have in mind?
Well, one of his key proposals was to use surplus tax revenue to provide direct support to families with young children.
Okay.
He saw this as an investment in the future, ensuring that all children, regardless of their background, had a chance to thrive.
Mm.
He also advocated for providing for the elderly, recognizing that those who had contributed to society throughout their lives deserve support in their later years.
These ideas sound remarkably familiar.
They do.
Social security, welfare programs, these are things we often associate with modern social safety nets.
Right.
It's surprising to hear that someone was advocating for them back in the 18th century.
It challenges the notion that these ideas are recent inventions. Paine saw them as fundamental to a just and humane society. He was centuries ahead of his time in recognizing the role government could play in addressing social and economic inequality.
And he didn't stop there, did he?
No, he didn't.
I recall reading about his thoughts on inheritance and the system of primogeniture.
Right.
Could you refresh our listeners on what that is and why it bothered Paine so much?
Sure. Primogeniture is the system where the eldest son inherits the entire estate.
Right.
And Paine saw this as a major contributor to wealth inequality, as it concentrated wealth and power in the hands of a select few.
Okay.
He proposed a progressive tax system on inheritance to break up large estates and distribute wealth more evenly.
So he wanted to prevent the perpetuation of an entrenched aristocracy. It sounds like he was aiming for a more meritocratic society where success wasn't simply determined by who your father was.
Precisely. He believed everyone should have a fair shot, not just those born into privilege. He wanted to create a system where opportunities were based on talent and hard work, not on inherited wealth or social status.
This raises some really interesting questions about our own society. Could some of Paine's ideas be applied today? I mean, we still grapple with issues of wealth inequality, social mobility, and the influence of inherited wealth. What would happen if we looked at these challenges through the lens of Paine's ideas?
That's a crucial question for all of us to consider. Paine's work challenges us to examine our own systems and structures. Are they truly serving the interests of all citizens? Or are they perpetuating inequalities and reinforcing the power of a select few?
It's a powerful reminder that the issues Paine was wrestling with over 200 years ago are still very much alive today.
They are.
But his work doesn't just highlight problems, it offers potential solutions. He believed in the power of reasoned debate, public discourse, and ultimately in the power of the people to create a more just and equitable society.
And this is where Paine's vision goes beyond simply critiquing the existing system. He doesn't just want to dismantle the old, he wants to build something new and better. He believed in progress, in the capacity of human beings to create a world where reason and justice prevail.
So he wasn't just a fiery revolutionary.
No.
He was also an optimist. He believed that a better world was possible.
Absolutely. And that optimism is infectious. It's a call to action, an invitation for each of us to engage in the ongoing struggle for a more just and equitable world.
So we've been exploring Thomas Paine's radical ideas about government power and social justice.
Right.
But it seems like he wasn't content with just revolutionizing one country.
Yeah.
He had a much broader vision, didn't he?
Absolutely. Paine was a true internationalist. He believed that the principles of liberty and equality should extend beyond national borders.
Mm-hmm.
He even envisioned a future where nations would cooperate, not just coexist.
This is where his ideas take on an almost utopian quality. In Rights of Man, he talks about an alliance between England, France, and America. I mean, those three working together.
Right.
After spending centuries at each other's throats. It seems almost unimaginable.
It was a radical proposition, but that was Paine's genius. He refused to be limited by the political realities of his time. He dared to imagine a world where nations recognized their shared humanity and worked together for the common good.
But what about national security? Wouldn't such cooperation leave nations vulnerable? It seems like he was almost advocating for pacifism in a world that was anything but peaceful.
Yeah.
How did he reconcile those seemingly contradictory ideas?
Well, Paine believed that war primarily served the interests of governments and ruling elites, not the interests of ordinary people. And he argued that war diverted resources, fueled division, and distracted from the real work of building a just and equitable society.
So he saw war as a symptom of a deeper problem, a failure of governments to prioritize the well-being of their citizens and to find peaceful solutions to conflict. It's a pretty scathing indictment of traditional power structures.
Precisely. Paine believed that by embracing reason, cooperation, and diplomacy, nations could create a more peaceful and prosperous world for everyone. He argued that the pursuit of peace wasn't just a moral imperative, but also a practical one.
It's remarkable how relevant his ideas feel today in a world still grappling with conflict, inequality, and the challenges of global cooperation. It makes you wonder, are we any closer to realizing Paine's vision of a more just and peaceful world?
That's a question each of us must grapple with. While we may not have achieved Paine's utopia, his ideas continue to inspire and challenge us.
Right.
He reminds us that progress is possible, but it requires constant vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to imagine and fight for a better future.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the origins of government to the potential for international cooperation.
Yeah, we have a...
But before we wrap up, I want to return to something you mentioned earlier, the power of reason.
Okay.
It seems like that was at the heart of everything Paine believed in.
Absolutely. Paine saw reason as the key to unlocking human potential and creating a more just and equitable society. He believed that by questioning assumptions, challenging authority, and engaging in reasoned debate, we could overcome ignorance, prejudice, and oppression.
That's a powerful message, especially in today's world, where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
It is.
It's easy to get swept up in the latest trends, ideologies, or social media frenzies without stopping to think critically about what we believe and why.
Right.
Paine reminds us that we're not just passive consumers of information.
Yeah.
We're active agents of change. We have the power to shape our own destinies and the world around us. But it starts with engaging our minds, questioning everything, and never taking anything for granted. So where does that leave us?
Yeah.
What's the call to action for our listeners?
Go read Thomas Paine. Don't just take our word for it. Engage with his ideas directly. See what resonates with you, what challenges you, and what inspires you.
And then, most importantly, talk about it.
Yeah.
Share these ideas with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Start a conversation, a debate, even a revolution of ideas.
Because that's the true legacy of Thomas Paine. He wasn't just a writer, he was a catalyst. He sparked a fire of revolution, not just in the political realm, but in the minds of individuals.
And that fire still burns today, fueled by the same spirit of inquiry, the same passion for justice, and the same belief in the power of reason to create a better world. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
And join us next time as we continue to delve into the most fascinating and thought-provoking ideas that have shaped our world.